प्लीज चेक करके Okay, so we are live. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Alternate Careers with Storians. I am Survi Mahodia. I am the host of this webinar, and I have Mahua with me. Mahua is a member of my team and comes with some, or I would say, a little knowledge more than me when it comes to food and alcohol. She understand. I am on the customer side of it, and she's at the technical side of it. So I think it will be a very nice conversation. And we have Akash with us today, and Akash, I am very
Hi,
very
hi
excited
everyone.
about this discussion with us. So, Akash, let me tell you guys a little bit about Akash. Akash has been involved in corporate careers to start with, and has done a lot of things in his, professional life. He's been an owner of a coffee chain. He has done animation. He's been into finance, and finally figuring out that he's the lover of a craft beer. He started researching on Alcobev. Is that what you call it, Akash? Alcobev?
I would say, well, not alcobev. Alcobev is quite a large spectrum, but I've sort of focused on beer and craft beer primarily.
Right, right. So Akash
So yeah, there.
is a beer consultant and has been and been into entrepreneurship for quite some time now. He's a passionate writer. He discovers his passion through of writing in his blog on Instagram. And I was when researching about you, Akash, I
Hmm.
have so many mainline newspapers and online news magazines have quoted you, have
Right.
mentioned you in their articles, and you've had a fair
Hmm.
amount of media coverage as well. You
Hmm.
also have a huge online community called as Craft and Co, which is of
Yes.
craft, beverage enthusiasts. So
Hmm.
when you say enthusiasts, what does it mean? Like people who are generally into this profession, or people who are
Um,
generally fond of consuming beer and are their evangelists?
no, I wouldn't say people who are in the profession. It's for anyone. The
Okay.
purpose of
Okay.
the platform and the forum is actually to give anyone an opportunity to discuss the beverage of their preference. Now, Craft and Company is an inclusive platform, so we now there's a lot of stuff happening in the coffee space. So we included coffee and non-alcoholic beverages. Recently, we took that call, but otherwise, it's a space for people to talk about the craft that they taste, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, share feedback, good or bad. A lot of brands also look at the group to see what kind of feedback is coming in.
Right.
Awareness generally, it's not for professionals, so as to speak. It's for
Okay.
anyone who wishes to talk about craft, and share what they feel about it. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how it sort of started, and it's evolved. Like I said, when now we've recently started. Um, we've recently taken the decision to even start talking about non-alcoholic craft, coffee,
Right.
kombucha, these kind of things.
Right.
I, of course, don't have in-depth knowledge about too much knowledge about those things, so it's great to see other people talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as we always say, you never stop learning. So this is
True.
just one of those ways.
True, true. Excellent. So, tell us something about yourself.
Well, about me. Well, I'm a Bangalore boy. I have been here, barring 2 years of my life in Bombay. I've been in Bangalore my entire life. Um, so, and of course, Bangalore. That suits me because Bangalore is sort of the home and the capital of craft beer of the country,
Yeah. Yeah.
with over 60 breweries, microbreweries,
Yeah.
producing craft beer here. Let's see. I mean, I started out my career actually at Coffee Day,
Uh-huh.
wherein I literally walked into one of their stores and said, "Hey, I need a job." So they told me what to do, and that started. That cafe is still standing today, in fact. So once in a while, I
Oh,
do
wow.
pop in there for old time's sake. And then I moved into finance. Well, I did some work with a startup in the animation field. I moved into finance after that, where I spent a large part of my career.
Right.
And then post that, I went into a little bit of digital marketing.
Okay.
And then at some point around there was when I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't do the corporate. I mean, it was literally just, it was one of those, okay, I'm done, you know, that kind of situation. And I actually started a cloud kitchen. Well, I actually started a food truck first, but because that was not a very organized sector, I decided
Yeah.
to shut that and get into well, in those days they weren't really very common. I think there was only
Right.
a couple of the big ones. But we started at that time. We didn't call it a cloud kitchen, and it was just like, hey, listen, I have this, and I only do deliveries. So yeah, I used to do wood-fired pizzas. Um,
Wow.
and then, I mean, then that's around the time also when I started getting curious about beer. Um, and I said, okay, let me start understanding this a little more, because I mean,
Right. Right.
I liked so many different kinds of beer. I was like, I need to understand this. What makes these different? What is because that time around, this was around 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, that craft beer revolution and those kind of words started being used in Bangalore.
Right.
It's also, I mean, craft beer is also pretty big in Pune,
Hmm.
where there's some interesting stuff going on as well. And so from there on, it sort of became a more and more intense sort of. I didn't actually have any kind of formal education. It was just a lot of reading, a lot of YouTube videos, reading stuff online,
Right.
and really actually talking to brewers. Brewers, it's like how anyone who's in the food business will always want
Right.
to talk to a chef to understand what they're doing with the dish. It's exactly the same with this, and I've been lucky in that brewers have just been so happy to answer my questions, however inane or silly they may sound.
Right.
Um, and I'm friends with a few brewers, and I have a couple that I constantly call whenever I have any kind of questions, technical questions,
Right.
to help me get the answers I want. So that's kind of how it started, and from there it sort of evolved into doing events. I do pub quizzes. Well, I
Right.
did. I mean, of course, the pandemic shut everything down.
Yes.
So, so pub quizzes, I help sort of people help staff also. Because I think the ability of someone to sell a beer is important, and to do it in the most simple way.
Right.
So things like that, and yeah, now I mean I've started my own business venture where I'm working towards taking Indian-made craft beer overseas,
Wow.
which I'm quite excited about. Yep.
It is quite exciting. It is.
Hmm.
So, so all this while, what I've understood that you've tried your hands at pretty much everything. And
Hmm.
is this right to say that this is that this is what you want to do? This is where your passion lives,
Hmm.
and passion lies here, and this is what you want to pursue.
Absolutely. I think this is what I finally settled on in terms of building a full-fledged career.
Right.
I mean, when I was much younger, I knew at some point I would like to be an entrepreneur. I've seen my dad do it. I've seen many close friends do it. So
Right.
that was sort of there. I just didn't know which direction to take it in. But I think now I've gotten to this stage, and this is the direction that I want to pursue. And it's good in the sense that because India is a fairly nascent market, craft beer has existed here for barely 10 years, and
Right.
it's grown in those 10 years very very rapidly. I mean, I know people who were brewers in the US, and they said what's happened here in 10 years took 20 years in the first 20 years in the US. So it's a great place to be. Hopefully, this once this virus is dealt with, it'll go back to being great, because obviously everything has come to a fairly standstill right now. But yep, this is definitely the career I'm going to pursue now and
What
stick
was
with it.
your family's reaction?
Well, I mean, I think they understood that the whole corporate thing, while it's relatively safe, it's not something that suited me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be upfront and say, like, I was never a good student in terms of marks and exams. I
Right.
had other skills which were more beneficial to me, such as, I mean, that's why, I mean, like, I always prefer to talk to someone rather than sit and write a bunch of things down. And it's the same thing now. So, um, and I think so. From there on, I think they realized that may not stay on the same than what's considered the normal path, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they didn't really have a problem with it.
Okay.
They were like, as long as you're okay and you manage your affairs properly, we no one to say to stand in your way, kind of thing. So that was there, because I mean, from a fairly young age, I was given the independence and the freedom to do what I want, how I want, kind of thing. So it's been yeah, that way there's there were no fears or qualms about it really,
Right.
um, when I started getting into this. So yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
That's really nice to know. So, for
Hmm.
someone who wants to explore a career in the drinks industry,
Right.
um, so far, what I understand, and so far from what my research says, that there are no formal education options, because
Hmm.
obviously this career is not being supported by families at the first place, because it is being understood as a career that can actually um, inculcate or build a habit of become somebody can become an alcoholic, somebody can.
Hmm.
It's not seen in a very good light when it comes to our country per se. So how do
Right.
you break
Right.
that stigma? How do you get started? What does it
Um,
take to actually convince people that this is serious, this is business?
mhm. Well, actually, I mean, depending on where in the alcohol space you want to be, there are some courses that are available. I mean, they may not be full-fledged degrees. They're sort of things you do over and above a degree.
Hmm.
I know that there are that for wine there are a bunch of different courses you can do.
Right.
In the case of beer, there is for someone to become a brewer, there is a formal degree,
Okay.
which I think there's a university of what's called Heriot Watt University is the most well known, along with the Siebels and Domans Institute, where you spend time, sometime in Germany, sometimes in the US. And in
Right.
India, actually, there's the Vasantara Sugar Institute,
Right.
somewhere near Pune, where a lot of homegrown brewers have actually come out of there.
Okay.
So those are for brewers. But now you're right in when you say there's for something similar to what I do, there's not an entirely formal um, curriculum that you go through. You can I have sort of learned to understand various sensory parts of
Hmm.
when it comes to tasting a beer and things like that. So that's something called the Cicerone, which is essentially a series of exams which you can do in and earn certain qualifications,
Hmm.
where you get quite deep into beer. The level one is an online exam, but
Okay.
beyond that, to do level two, three, and four, there are practical exams that are involved and things like that. So you do get quite in depth into this.
Hmm.
These are not There are no real formal exams in this aspect. Similarly,
Okay.
there's the beer judge certification program, which is again very, very intense, and
Right.
basis of how well you do, you get awarded a certain kind of certification, which has a few different levels. These
Hmm.
unfortunately are not really common in India because they require access to uh, one is the exams, as well as people who are qualified in these same ways, which there are very, very few
Right.
who have those qualifications in India.
Right.
I don't see why that shouldn't change when more and more people start getting
Hmm.
interested in this kind of thing. That might change over the next few years, or at least I hope it will change. So there's that. Now, in terms of actually building a career.
Hmm.
Yes, there is a stigma in generally in Indian society. There's a stigma
Yeah.
around alcohol, and it's a big taboo. Um, I think the primary reason for that it's is it there are a few different aspects to that. Why alcohol is considered taboo is probably because from what I've seen, Indian society was not really taught responsible consumption of alcohol. It's ultimately it's a social lubricant, as I like to call it. It's not, but a lot of people drink for the purpose of getting intoxicated, um, and that's their main goal.
Right.
That is obviously very very slowly changing, particularly in urban areas. Is changing, which is why something like craft beer has taken off the way it has.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the best way to actually get into it, and this probably sounds a little um, goes against the grain and sounds like the opposite of what I was saying, is to actually start trying different things,
Mm-hmm.
like different beers. That's how I started. I got curious. I said there must be more to beer than just this one
Hmm.
commercial thing that we get, and it sort of, and then that's when I realized there's
Hmm.
thousands of different styles of beers that one can try. So it starts out with trying, and then I mean, if you want to get serious about it, what I did was I started trying to sort
Hmm.
of break down what I thought of the beer. What did it taste like? What did it smell like? Oh, this smells a little funny, but that one didn't. What was the
Hmm.
difference? That kind of thing. So that's where all the reading started.
Okay.
And slowly today, the alcobev industry is, at least again in urban areas, is are sort of they are people who are building careers, whether they're mixologists or someone like me, and that it's slowly happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's not yet full fledged, but it is happening because you see today. Let's say, for example, let's talk about cocktails. A few
Right.
years ago, cocktails at a bar in India, even in urban areas, was largely, maybe not entirely, but largely it would have been your classic cocktails such as your screwdrivers, your
Right.
mojitos, this, that, and
Right.
nothing too creative that. So basically, it was
Right.
just a matter of training someone to put those ingredients into a glass and present it in the right way. But
Hmm.
today, there are bars in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad who are doing real out of the box stuff using ingredients that sometimes even I haven't heard of these ingredients. I mean, they're so,
Okay.
and it's really, it's more about the skill of the person making it and how they do it, their creativity, rather than just presenting something that is going to get someone intoxicated. So that
True.
change is slowly happening. It's a
Okay.
good sign as far as I'm concerned,
Right. Right.
because that will hopefully. I mean, as I said, it's all sort of the way progress is happening. Is people are realizing that the purpose of having a drink is not to get drunk, but to enjoy it, to enjoy the company around you and things
Right.
like that. And that's where this creativity is also coming out. Similarly, with beer, there, while there are a lot of classic beers, there are quite a few things which there are several which are so outrageous and so out of the box that when I look
Right.
at the names of them, I'm like, wow, what is this? I've had ice cream inspired beers, and
Wow.
all sorts of things. It's quite interesting, and quite it's getting quite creative out there. So yeah, I mean, to come back to how does one start, you have to start by trying different beers and then getting into those beers that you're trying, not just drinking them. And you know I mean, the added benefit is that you do get to drink them as well, but you get to
True.
continue sort of, and the more you do it, like the more you, at least for me, the way it worked, the more I dissected the beer, the better I got. I
Right.
realized what my palate is better at picking up. There are some people whose, everyone varies. They may have certain strengths. I realize my nose is quite sensitive, but
Hmm.
what be as accurate as what I smell, kind of thing. So it. So I guess that's where it starts with. It's curiosity and the will to make money off having a beer. I guess.
True. And it just struck me that we should have given a disclaimer with our invites. 23 plus only.
Yeah, well, that's probably true. Well, we're not really giving anyone alcohol, right?
I was actually expecting that you probably would be sitting with a pint or something. So
I thought of it. I thought of it, but just water today.
cheers.
I shall
I'll
save.
share the coffee with
Uh,
you.
cheers, cheers. I shall say I have saved my pints for the evening.
That'll be nice. That'll be nice. Right. Now that we are talking about it, and we are talking about the various types of varieties that are being created,
Hmm.
I am and whenever it comes to beer, and it has been something in my bucket list to ask someone their opinion about shandy. What do you think about shandy?
What do I think? I don't particularly like it, but to be honest, again, so anything you eat or drink is subjective.
Right.
Just because someone doesn't like something, it doesn't mean it's bad. Like,
Right.
for example, I can't stand Karela. I hate it,
True.
but mean it's
I can't
bad.
stand
You know, I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people who can't stand Karela, but but that's what I mean. It's subjective, and it's interesting that you've asked this question because I was just thinking there are in today's world of Zomato and food blogging and things like that,
right.
where pretty much anyone and everyone can put out an opinion.
Right.
Um, I think what I've noticed often is that a lot of a lot of people who sort of put out opinions are of the belief that just because they don't like something that means it's bad.
True.
Now that's something which I'm very particular about whenever I taste a beer and I'm asked for feedback. Like for example, I mean, products have come to me for sampling before they're released into market and things like that. Now there are
Right.
certain styles of beer that I don't like. Like one of the most common styles in India is a style I just don't like. It's the Belgian
Hmm.
wit style of beer. It's got a slight citrusy coriander notes, that kind of thing. There are many variants of it available. I mean, many
Right.
brands under the same variant. It's a
Right.
style that I don't personally like, but that doesn't mean that the beer is bad. Like there are good ones, there are bad ones, there are better ones. I mean, when something is bad, there is something wrong with it. But when I don't like something, that doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong with it. So
Right.
that's a distinction which I think has to be very clear in someone's head. Now, putting out an opinion saying, "Oh, you know what? I don't like this. It's bad," is different from saying, "Hey, you know what? This one is not for me." And
True.
that's something that needs to be key. That's something that I feel has sort of unfortunately corrupted
True.
uh, the
True.
food industry, where people are called to give their opinions and they just say, okay, this is good, this is bad. There's no
Hmm.
reasoning or what basis on why they think it's good or bad, and that sort of sends a slightly wrong impression. And that's something that I certainly hope doesn't happen, because people really need to be cognizant of the fact of what they don't like does not necessarily mean it's bad, or what they like does not also necessarily mean it's good. So that's sort of so that's a perception. But at the end of the day, like you said, you come back to Shandy. It's if you like it, you like it. There's nothing wrong with liking it.
True.
It's
True.
as simple as that. What anybody else thinks of it is irrelevant. Yeah.
True. Very
Now,
true.
I mean,
And when it
if you
comes
make a
to
shandy with a beer that's made with a bunch of flaws, that is not properly made, that's a
right,
different thing.
that's
You
the
know.
thing. Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
It was a
personal
very
preference.
interesting cocktail back then. People believed that a cocktail cannot be created with beer. So when it came out in the market, it was pretty revolutionary back then.
Well, I mean, I have a different opinion on cocktails being made with beer, but well, let's not get into that.
Yes. Let's not talk about that. Okay, so now that we're talking about having a taste of certain type of, alcohol or beer per se, um,
Mhm.
and when it comes to, you said that having a certain palate, everybody has a different taste, everybody has a different palate and sensitivity to certain kind of tastes. When it
Yes.
comes to this field, um, how is it like categorized that my palate tastes my palate can taste sour better, so I am a this type of a beer taster or something like that? I mean, do you have beer tasters or samplers, or how long does it take to basically train your palate to identify the kind of palate that you have?
Okay, I mean, well, yeah, there are beer tasters.
Okay.
So the programs I spoke about earlier, the beer judge certification program and the Cicerone, typically those kind of people are tasters because these organizations have guidelines by which a beer is classified in terms of by style, what it's supposed to be. There is, of course, out of the box stuff as well, which won't conform to any of these styles.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, the key thing is in a beer is now if something goes wrong during the brewing process, or if there is no if there's improper sanitation, improper
Mm.
storage, all sorts of things. A number of things can lead to something going wrong with the beer.
Hmm.
Um, Both your beer judge certification program, your BJCP as it's called, as well as your Cicerone, teach
Right.
you to identify these flaws.
Okay. Okay.
Now, in terms of those particular flaws, there are
Mm-hmm.
some people who can pick out certain things better.
Okay.
Like, for example, there is a compound or a flaw called in a beer called diacetyl. That's something I can pick out very, very easily.
Okay.
But there
Okay.
are people, there is also in some kinds of beer, sulfur comes out. There are some
True.
people I know who can pick that out from when the glass is sitting on the table. It's not even close to their face, you
Okay.
know.
Okay. All
So
right.
that varies from person to person. And in
Okay.
terms of training yourself, it's just a matter of understanding these flaws and what causes them. Once you
Mhm.
understand that, of course, you can go deeper and deeper into it, and that will continue to improve your knowledge. But yeah, that's sort of what it takes. You have to understand what uh, have a basic understanding of what the beer is supposed to be, and what the beer is supposed to be also does not necessarily have to conform to those guidelines. You have to talk to a
Okay.
brewer and say, hey, what were you going for,
Hmm.
and then see how close that beer is to what. That's the nice thing about craft beer. You can do what you want with it. I mean, I know
Right.
people who've made beer with agave, this thing that's used to make tequila. I know people who've
Okay.
made
Okay.
beer, put them in barrels, added cherries to them, added strawberry, all sorts of things. I mean, you can do chocolate, ginger, so many things. I mean, so the best thing to do is to talk to a brewer and say, hey, listen, what we are going for here, and then see how closely it matches to that. And how generally, I mean, a good brewer will make sure there are no flaws in your beer because
Right.
everything is done properly. There's proper sanitation, temperatures are
True.
maintained, everything is maintained, storage is proper. So yeah, so that's sort of what it is, I guess. Like I said, some people may be able to pick certain things out better,
True.
but in
Okay.
terms of flavors and aromas, you associate it with other things that you have. Like for example, certain beers will have a slightly biscuity, toasty. Now,
Right.
obviously, biscuits or toast, you realize you relate it to that. So that's how it sort of works. I mean,
Okay.
it helps to have tried a wide variety of things.
Creating that
Um,
correlation with an
yes,
existing
it's
familiar.
always a correlation.
Okay.
Yes, yes, it's almost always a correlation of something you've tasted or smelled
Okay.
before.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
All right. That's interesting. So, since how long have you been doing this, Akash?
Well, I got curious about it about 4 years ago.
Okay.
I started getting serious about it maybe about 3 years ago when I did actually uh, do a sort of intensive boot camp where I was
Right.
taught about the brewing process in a little more detail and was taught how to identify what these certain off flavors and smells were and things like that. And sort of from then onwards was when I started getting serious about it. And that's when obviously I started trying different beers and starting to dissect them. So yeah, it's been about 3 years, I would say. And I mean, in the last year and a half or so, I would say is when it's really sort of started picking up, where I started doing events and things like that. I've
Mm-hmm.
done beer and food bed
Mm-hmm.
events and things like that. So yeah, so that's been in the last what a year and a half, 2 years, I would say. Since then is when it's really picked up. really gotten more and more serious.
Okay. So when you started in this field, how did you go
Mhm.
on about marketing yourself? How do you build that trust? How do people know that you are the right person to do the job for them?
Well, I mean, and in the beginning, I started with the thing of just wanting to, this is what I feel about this beer. I was not interested in collecting followers or gaining or getting free stuff and things like that. I was like, hey, this is what I bought this beer. I had it. This is what I think of it.
Right.
Um, it is then, and that is obviously also when I started talking to brewers, brewery
Mm-hmm.
owners, etc., asking them questions about the business and things like that.
Right. Right.
So that sort of was how I built a network, I guess, also.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sort of happened very organically. I didn't push it in a certain direction, kind of thing. Um,
Okay.
at that time, I was still unclear of what exactly, how exactly I would build something in this field. But yeah, it just sort of happened. I guess
Right.
talking to the right people, talking about beer to people is what to people who are in the business, and then
Right.
I guess the Instagram following grew because I tried to put things across in simple terms so that anybody could
Right.
read it and understand what I meant. I didn't get too technical.
True.
So I guess that helped. And
Right.
while on the business side, I was learning things about the technicals. I've even done collaborative brews with a
Right.
couple of breweries, sat with
Right.
where I've actually sat with them, and they've sort of showed me, okay, this is how we make a recipe. This is what we need to do now,
Hmm.
and gone through the whole brewing process and things like that. Which obviously, it's like anything. Like when you were in college, you have all this theory that you've learned, and then you go out into the real world, and then you start doing a real job, and there's so much more
Right.
that you learn. It was exactly the same experience for me, that there was so much more that I learned on that, just those few collaborative brews that I've worked on.
Hmm. Hmm.
In it sort of put a lot of the theory into practice, and then there was just so many small subtle things that you don't realize or you can't really learn in
True.
your when you're just reading something. So that's where it sort of grew from, I guess, and that's how it happened. I guess I would just say it just happened organically. I didn't, and it thankfully went seems to be going in the right direction.
That's right. And you write with the pen name as Birabet, right?
Beer a bit, yeah. It's
Birabet. Oh,
that's
Birabet.
actually
Okay. What is the
so
thought behind that name? Very, very interesting.
so so my last name is Hirebet.
Right.
And a very, very old friend of mine. I mean, I've always loved beer. It's not something I
Hmm.
discovered only in the last few years. We
Right.
used to have a Sunday ritual where we used to go to this pub, have a couple of beers, then go to this seafood restaurant next to it, and
Right.
have our fish fry, prawn fry, everything, and then go back to the pub, have a few more beers for calling it a day. And he started calling me instead of Akash Hirebet, he started calling me Akash Hirebet, and that's sort of what I decided to put as my um, let's say my brand or my persona.
Your
And
personal brand. Yes. Yes.
yeah, and that's sort of how it happened. I think this was. I mean, he started calling me this. I think sometime in 2008 or 2009. So
Right.
it's been a while, and a few years ago, he's since moved overseas. A few years
Okay.
ago, when he was here, when I was just sort of getting into this whole thing,
Right.
he he actually, yeah, I think we had gone to some pub to have a few drinks, and he mentioned it again, and I was like, oh, hey, that's a nice identity, so as to speak. I think I'm going to do that.
And
So
quite
yeah, that's
popular, very catchy. I must say, the name that you've picked has a very high retention value when it in the technical terms. It's very easy to remember,
yes,
and
yes, yes.
so I think that's the beauty of it. So now coming back to making a career in the drinks industry, you knew
Hmm.
that it's fairly new in India back then. I mean,
Yes,
even if I'm
yes.
talking about 5 years from now, it is still very nascent. It
Hmm.
hasn't started peaking yet, if I may say so.
Mm-hmm.
and there are very limited options when it comes to education, or certification, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of very limited career choices when it comes to. Now I believe from last 1 year or so there is a rise in craft beers when breweries are actually brewing their own in-house beers. Earlier it was just
Mm-hmm.
the popular, off the counter brands that were available in the
Yes.
bar. So,
Yes.
when you started out, and I'm sure every beginning, every career you start with some sort of insecurity, some sort of
Mm-hmm.
fear of unknown, whether it'll work out or not work out, whether even
Right.
if it's work out, will it be sustainable or will it be not sustainable? Because this is a very
Mm-hmm.
volatile industry. I know
Yes.
for sure because I've seen I've friends who have actually had to shut down their job, businesses, or had to leave their businesses because the industry that firm was not flourishing.
Right.
Um, so how did you overcome that?
Well, I mean that fear has always been there and will always be there, which helps to an extent. I mean, so long as it doesn't overtake your whole all your emotions.
Hmm.
But I think at the time when I started doing this, I was so fed up of corporate work, and I mean, as cliched as it sounds, I was just fed up of doing the same thing day in and day out, and essentially helping someone else fulfill their dream. That
Hmm.
that started going. I mean, I wanted to do something more exciting. It outweighed that monotony of sitting and doing a repetitive job. I mean, like I said, the fear is still always there. Like, for example, this whole coronavirus situation has been
Right.
very, very hard on the food and beverage industry,
Right.
particularly the alcohol industry, because today almost we're almost 6 months in, and bars are still not allowed to stay open. Are not allowed to
True.
open. So there's a number of things that are difficult, a number of fears. Government policies are so outrageous and ridiculous,
Right.
especially in a country like India, where basically it's up to individual states. So that basically means you're dealing with different countries for all practical purposes.
True. Very
So there's a lot of stuff that is difficult, but like I said, just the prospect of doing something exciting has sort of outweighed the fears, and that's what has kept me going. Like as is with anything, there have been highs and lows.
Mhm.
Excuse me. Periods of uncertainty. Where's the next paycheck going to come from? Oh, can I pay this bill? All that's been there, and so long as you're an entrepreneur, I think that's going to always be there till such time that, because I mean of the way the world functions today, that's going to always be there somewhere in the
Hmm.
back of your head. It may go further back, it may be more prominent depending on what the situation is. But yeah, I mean it's also a massive learning. I mean, when I think back when I started my food truck, the first thing I learned was like, okay, you know what? There is a time where you have to cut your losses and go. You know,
Right.
if I hadn't done that, I would not know when to do that.
True.
Uh, if I hadn't gotten into that, I would never know when to do that. So, I
True.
mean, there's a lot of learning from failure, from success, from everything. There is a lot of learning there is to be done. Like, for example, now I want to take Indian craft beer overseas, because I think
True.
today there are some brands that have built themselves and are made a product that is of quality that will stand up to scrutiny overseas as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
They're that good, and I feel they deserve to get that recognition. But there are plenty of unknowns that are going on even right now in this business as well.
Wait.
Because
Wait.
nobody's really taken a brand from India somewhere else in terms of the
Someone
beer
else.
space.
Right.
So always a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns. But
Mm-hmm.
the trick is to sort of solve problem, keep going, and stay positive.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and also at times when there's too much going on, it's okay to take a break. I don't want
I,
to paint a rosy picture that everything is going to be great. There are times when I get overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to take a break. I'm not going to do any work today. And I think that holds good for really any an entrepreneur in any kind of uh, business, not just this. Of course, this one has the
right.
added stress of all the government chaos, but and regulations and silly rules that are there.
Right.
But yeah, I think positive, working. I mean, you don't have to have a big goal. Also, you can start by checking off smaller goals. I think that helps to make a be as organized as you can. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's sort of where it is. And like I said, the obviously the pandemic has hit the F&B industry very very hard, and hoping that
Right.
that's something that starts changing soon. And yeah, because I mean, obviously, I mean, us aside, there are literally millions upon millions of people who don't have jobs because restaurants are closed and bars are closed, and
True.
unfortunately, restaurants and bars are the type of places which will employ a lot of people who can't really be employed anywhere else because they may not have the education or the skill or the access to,
Right.
So, I mean, in terms of fear, all that is still there, but yeah, I mean, I keep working towards the next step.
Great. I
Yeah.
recently read in a newspaper, and also
Hmm.
while I was, researching on you, you quoted in a
Hmm.
newspaper that if a restaurant can produce food and
Hmm.
sell it for takeaway, why can't a
Hmm.
microbrewery produce beer and be allowed to sell for takeaways? Do
Yes.
you think, without diving into a lot of details, but do you think somewhere this can actually um, solve the problem of the problem this industry is facing currently? Do you think this way they can at least start monetizing it to a certain extent?
Hmm. Well, okay. So that I think that article was sometime in May, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes,
or
yes.
maybe even a little earlier. Yeah.
March, March,
But
March.
since then, Bangalore, that is Karnataka, Maharashtra, and West Bengal, allowed to actually sell their beer as
Mhm.
takeaway.
Okay.
Um, in Karnataka and West Bengal, it's a temporary special arrangement for the current situation,
Mm-hmm.
wherein the Craft Brewers Association of India lobbied very hard to get this to happen because they applied that logic. They're saying, look, I mean, if a restaurant can sell food, why can't I sell my beer? I'm making it on
True.
site. It's all legally manufactured. I've paid all my duties for it. Why can't I just continue to sell it? So they have allowed it. Whether it can replace the original model of where people go to a brewery or a microbrewery or a pub to sit there and have a drink and eat something, no, it cannot. It's not. The sales volume is probably 10-15% on average of what it is, because I mean, why do people go out for a drink? They don't go out. Again, that's the changing landscape, right? They're going out to meet friends, to socialize, to
Yes.
sit there. It's the ambiance, the music, the food. It's all into one. So obviously, it's not going to be able to replace the original model. But in terms of helping a brand or a small business sustain,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's something that's needed. And if you ask me, I feel that even if in the event they do allow bars to open, which there is talks of, it, there's no clarity, but they're thinking, okay, they will be allowed. They won't be. They're not sure, but they're hoping they will be allowed to soon open. I think
Mm-hmm.
it should still be allowed to continue because in Karnataka and West Bengal, it's a temporary relief. It's not a permanent change to the policy. I feel
Mm-hmm.
they should, at least for the next few months, still be allowed because people are not going to see the kind of business they saw pre-COVID times for a long time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
generally in the industry, the talk is that we'll see pre-COVID level businesses in probably 2022,
Okay.
not anytime soon before
Oh,
that.
that's a long way to go. Long, long way to go.
Yeah, so there has to be some changes to policy to help people survive.
True.
I would like to see this be continued to be allowed, um, maybe with certain caveats, at least till things, so that at least so that because these are all small businesses at the end of the day, microbrews are small businesses. They should be at least to the point where they're not bleeding anymore,
True.
because that's
True.
what's happening right now. They're just
Right now.
bleeding, even with this whatever little bit of sale that they can do. They're still bleeding because I mean your fixed costs, your rents, your overheads, etc. Salaries
Yes.
still have to be paid. Those are still
True.
due. Those don't stop being due. So yeah. So do I see it replacing the whole model? No. Do I see it helping out in this time? Yes.
Okay.
And I feel it should continue even after bars are allowed to open for some time till things stabilize.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
whether that'll happen, I don't know, but I hope it does.
Okay. Okay. So now let's just get out of this serious discussion, and I'm going to ask some very, very fun questions with you, and then
Okay.
my team member Mahua. Mahua is also a student representative,
Okay.
somebody who is just entering into the fields, and I'm sure she will have a lot of questions
Hmm.
around this. So just be ready to answer her questions. But first, I have some questions for you. I would also
Okay.
request our audience to write the answers if they know about it. These are some terms that are related to beer. Now,
Okay.
I believe that if you are a beer evangelist, a
Hmm.
beer connoisseur,
Hmm.
or somebody who just enjoys, craft beer, or you're a brewer, or somebody who just knows about beer, I'm sure
Hmm.
you are aware of these terms. So let me just ask Akash, and guys, please feel free. Please write your answers in the comment box. Let's see who gets it. Okay, what is a
Okay.
wart? I know about a wart
What?
that happens on the skin. What is a wart in hair?
What? Okay. What is actually literally what makes your beer. What is the sweet liquid that is obtained by steeping your grain in water to extract sugar, and then
Okay,
the yeast is what converts that wort into beer.
okay, okay,
Mhm.
wonderful. What is dry hopping?
Dry hopping. Okay, so hops are an essential component of beer. They used to add bitterness, flavor, aroma.
Okay.
Now, depending on what stage of the process they are added with, they can either add bitterness or aroma. Typically, to extract bitterness from hops, it has to be at a high temperature while the wort is hot. But if you add it when the temperature is lower, when it's cool or cold, you
Hmm.
extract aroma more than any kind of bitterness. So that's what dry hopping is, basically the process when you're adding hops in when the beer is cold to
Okay.
give it aroma. Yeah.
Oh,
Cold meaning it doesn't have to be at 1 degree or whatever. It can be at 20 degrees, but anything that's not hot, basically, so that you
okay.
get aroma as opposed to bitterness.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
What's Brett?
Brett, good question. Brett is like a yeast, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% clear on the details, but typically the yeast used to make beer is something called Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the common whatever term for it. Brett is short for Brettanomyces, which is a different kind of yeast which
Okay.
gives you a lactic fermentation. So your beer tends to be on the sour side. It gives it sourness. That's what Brett is. It's short for Brettanomyces.
Ah, okay. Okay.
The type of
What?
yeast, basically.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Crushable.
Crushable. If my friend Ashish is watching, I'm sure he'll be excited because he uses this word every now and then. Crushable is basically a term used to drink a beer that's very easy drinking, um, fruity, generally slightly sweet, maybe a little sour, but generally something that has fruity notes to it, easy drinking, uh,
Is it
good
alcoholic?
for a
Is
day.
that
You can have.
alcohol?
I'm sorry, you cut out there. Can you say that again?
Does it have a component of alcohol in it?
No. So crushable is just a descriptor. It's not specifically a beer term. But beers are described as crushable when they're slightly sweet, slightly sour, maybe even sometimes easy drinking. Generally, they may have a lot of fruit in them. So generally good for summer days, I would say. A
Ah, okay.
crushable
Okay.
beer is a beer that you can have a lot of, especially if it's a hot summer day.
Okay. Uh, what's a whale?
A whale.
A whale, yes.
Uh, well, I know Whale is an Icelandic beer brand. Beyond that, I'm not entirely sure.
I just
I
know
think it's
about a
Icelandic.
swimming animal. I just know about a swimming animal. I don't know what whale is when it comes to beer, but yes, it could
I
be.
suppose it could be used to also describe a big, bold, high alcohol beer. I don't know. I mean, this is just I'm guessing. It
Okay,
could be also used to describe a high alcohol beer. Those are called big beers or bold beers because they're usually
okay,
quite high alcohol and they're served in small serves because they're so high in alcohol. And yeah, that's a whole separate. Like I said, beers can you can do all sorts of crazy things with beers. But maybe I don't know. I'm not. Otherwise, beyond that, I can't really think of why you would use the term whale when it comes to beer.
okay, okay. Last one. What horse blanket?
Horse blanket.
Yes,
Horse
a
blanket is something you would associate with your Brettanomyces, actually.
horse.
So it's one of the uh, f- uh, aroma or flavor descriptors that you would use sometimes for a beer that's been made with Brettanomyces, because a horse blanket is literally a blanket for a horse, which, when you think about it, a horse goes through slightly damp, and so that sort of dampness is
Mm-hmm.
that damp cloth kind of aroma is what you would associate as horse blanket,
Okay, all
which
right.
generally is a character that comes from bread
That
fermentation.
comes, okay, that mushy smells that comes. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yes. That typically is something that comes from bread fermentation.
All right,
So
all
that's
right.
where you, like, for example, if you read the can or a bottle that has, or even just look something up online that says what are the flavor characteristics of a bread fermented beer, you'll see horse blanket, you'll see barnyard
Okay.
smells, that kind of thing. So
Oh,
it's all
right,
sort of like that. That
right,
slightly funky,
right,
unusual kind of, almost. I mean, like, some of the European cheeses you get, that kind of
right, right,
uh, flavors could be associated with bread fermentation. So
right.
yeah.
So I remember very initially when we were having a discussion about this,
Mhm.
this live, you mentioned something about something called as a mead. What is a mead?
Mead.
Yes.
Mead is actually not beer.
Okay.
Mead is made from honey.
Okay.
It's quite literally honey that's been fermented along with water.
Mm-hmm.
It is also, actually, from what I know, it is the oldest alcoholic beverage in the world. It was first with dating back to about 9,000 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, mead is not a beer. It's an alcoholic beverage made fermenting honey and water.
Okay. All right.
Hmm.
That's very
That's
interesting.
what it is in a nutshell. Yes.
Okay, all right. And you mentioned you've been saying this one word hop quite frequently. I only know of jumping and hopping, which I do with my children. What is a
Okay.
hop?
A hop. Let's see. Hops are, like I said, they're an essential component in the manufacturing of beer.
All
Um,
right.
they are they are literally. I mean, an easy way to describe it is they are the spice of beer.
Okay.
Um, because they give you bitterness to balance out the sweetness from the wort. Once you've extracted all the sugars, your wort is sweet. If you actually taste wort, it's very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, depending on when they're it, what it is basically it's a flower, is what it is. It grows. I mean, it grows all over the world, but primarily in cool, slightly damp conditions. Um,
Okay.
India is not really known for hops because of the climate.
Right.
Largely the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Oregon, Washington
Mm-hmm.
State of the US. Those are some of the largest hop growing regions in the world.
Okay. Okay.
Um, New Zealand, certain parts of Australia, South Africa, and of
Mm-hmm.
course, hops, of course, originated in Europe, in the Czech region, Germany, in the
Hmm.
UK, that kind of thing. So basically, hops, they give you certain aromas or flavors once they're put into the beer, depending on which stage. Like I said, whether it's hot, whether it's cold. When it's on the hot side, they give bitterness. and some flavor. When it's on the cold side, it's aroma.
Mm-hmm.
What it looks like is, I mean, if you actually look at a hop flower, if you Google hop flower, it'll look like a cone.
Okay.
But because they're not really usable in that form, they're sort of dehydrated and pelletized
Okay.
for standardization and easy use and transport and things like that. Because once you pluck them, you have very little time to treat them so that they can still give out the characteristics you're looking for. They're a
Okay.
natural ingredient. And the
Okay.
interesting thing is, hops from different regions in the world have different flavor characteristics.
Okay. Does
And
it
a
also
lot of
define
this,
the color of the beer? Does it
I
also
beg your pardon,
define the color of the beer?
the color of the beer
Yeah.
is that no, no, no. Color does not
Oh,
come from hops. Color comes from the grain that you use.
all right. Okay.
Yeah. So hops, like I said, the interesting thing is different parts of the world have different flavor and aroma characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of new age hops which started before American craft beer revolution were basically they crossbred classic hops from Germany or the Czech Republic and things like that with whatever was growing locally and sort of built on, and they realized that there's a lot that can be done.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, typically, like I said, your hops from America have very very prominent pine or resin and citrus characters.
Okay. Okay.
Hops from Australia and New Zealand have sort of more candy, some grape-like features, things like that. So it's quite interesting. Different hop growing regions have produced hops which have different flavors,
Okay.
and that's sort of what gives some beers their the kind of style that they are. I mean, depends. It'll be called, like, for example, an American pale ale will be a pale ale made with American hops, or an Australian will be hops
Okay.
made Australian hops. It can vary. I mean, you of course you can use a combination of hops also, which some brewers do from all over the world to get different flavors and
Yeah.
aromas as well. But yeah, essentially hops. It's a plant. It's what gives it's the spice of beer, as I like to call it, in a
Okay.
nutshell. And they're responsible for giving you bitterness as well as aroma.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
Right. Right. So Mahua is with us. I'm just gonna add her to our stream, and
Sure.
there she's facing some major troubles back at in her area. So
Oh
while
dear.
she's trying to join in, I'm going to take questions from
Hmm.
the audience. So Vishnu Rajkumar wants to know about sours and saison. Is that how you pronounce it?
Sours and saison. I'm also just looking at the comments now. I'm sure all my friends are heckling me. But oh wow, yeah, they're all heckling me. Vishnu Rajkumar. Sours and saisons. Sours are, well, sour beers. That's essentially what they are. They're beers that are allowed to sour. There's a few different ways of how you sour them. You can actually add dahi or yogurt to aid in the
Mhm.
souring, where into your wort, where you drop the pH to a certain level, or you can use let the wort sit and the pH drop before proceeding to your boil phase, where you add your hops so it sours naturally. And of course,
Okay.
then there's your Brettanomyces, which gives you a lactic fermentation as well. So
Right.
in a nutshell, that's what sour beers are. Sour
Hmm.
beers are typically, often, not always, but often, sour beers are, um, people tend to add fruit to them to balance out the sourness with a little bit of sweetness.
Okay.
Because the bitterness doesn't really play a role in this situation because of the sourness.
Hmm.
Saisons are actually one of the styles of beers I really enjoy. In fact,
Okay.
the the first collaborative brew I did with saison. Essentially, I think they originated in the region of Belgium that borders France.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
started out as what were called farmhouse ales, where basically um, you brewed with whatever grains you had,
Hmm.
and then once you let your beer sit till your harvest was done. Of course, saisons can also be soured in the sense that you use Brettanomyces yeasts You can add fruit to it if you'd like. There's a bunch of things you do. I mean, the Belgians do all sorts of things with their beer. They're
Hmm.
quite magical, in fact, when you think of the things that they do with beer. So that's what a saison is. It's a style that I personally like. It's a style I think actually a lot of Indians generally will like because it's got a
Okay.
slightly fruity, slightly spicy character to it,
Oh,
which
okay.
is
Okay.
kind of familiar to the Indian palate. So generally, if I see a saison somewhere, it usually sells quite quickly because it's familiar to the Indian palate.
Okay. We have
Mhm.
questions from okay, Bhavna Viparthi. She wants to know if you could drink one beer for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
That's a question. Um, yeah, wow, I can't choose just one. It'll probably be either a pale ale or an amber ale, or maybe a saison. See, it's not. I can't answer that question. But I do like certain types of beer. One are saisons.
Okay.
I do like pale ales as well.
Uh-huh.
I do like fruit infused gozers, which are a kind of sour beer.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, I can't choose just one. No,
Oh,
I
okay.
can't make that choice. And talking of sours, I mean, there's a friend of mine who is he's a big fan of sours.
Okay.
Um, and I just want to give Shesh a shout out. I'm hoping to see the day where we see sours on Instagram live one of these days.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Also,
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Kritika wants to know what are lambic bears.
Lambic beers. Lambic beers are wow. Okay, I'm a little sketchy, fuzzy on this one. Lambic beers are generally beers that are blended. They're Belgian styles of beer. Quite often they are sour because they've been
Uh-huh.
aged in a barrel or wild fermented. The Belgians do something called wild fermentation, which is essentially once your wort is ready, they don't actually add yeast to it. They let it ferment with the wild yeast that's in the air. So typically, lambics will be a blend of maybe slightly older and newer. I think older and newer beers. They're beers popular in Belgium, allowed to ferment wild. They may or may not be blended. It could go either way.
Okay.
But in a nutshell, that's what they are. The Belgians, yeah, they do some really adventurous things when it comes to beer. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure about the blending of the old and new. That might be another style, but yeah, typically beers
Mhm.
that have been allowed to age and have some sort of sour character, um,
Okay.
because they tend to age them in oak barrels, not in steel vat.
Okay.
So slightly woody, earthy kind of thing. Sometimes they may add fruit to it, cherries and things of the like. Sometimes they may not. It could
Mm-hmm.
go either way. So yep.
Okay. Okay. What are the three red flags while buying imported beers from our local stores?
Sorry, you broke up there. Could you say that again, please?
Sure. Is it better now?
Slight connections a bit. I heard imported beers. That was all I heard.
Yeah, connection seems a little wonky today. So, what
Mhm.
are the three red flags while buying imported beers from local stores? Again, a question from Kritika.
Okay. Okay. Great question, actually. I personally generally don't buy beers from imported stores because of the red flags. One is not really a red flag, but imported beers generally tend to be very expensive because of the high taxation.
Okay.
Now, two is because there is the cold chain gets broken once the beer reaches customs in
Mm-hmm.
India. And
Mm-hmm.
India is a warm country. Beer does not do well with heat. Um,
Right.
what could happen to the beer? The beer could get, I mean, it may not be treated properly in the way it's molded. moved around, so big holes formed in the caps or things like that. So beer could get oxidized. Often
Right.
craft beer is unfiltered and unpasteurized. So if it gets too warm, the yeast could die and give you a kind of putrid kind of taste or aroma. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also, if it's kept out in the sunlight, which is quite likely to happen, any beer that has yeast in it, yeast is called skunk, which is excuse me, it's basically when yeast is hit by light and there's a chemical reaction that happens. It's a fairly complex chemical reaction, but basically what happens is you start getting this skunky like smell out of the beer. So um, these are the things I would, if I was to buy uh, an imported beer at a store, I would ask the store owner if this has always been under refrigeration since it entered the store. Now, maybe some systems and the time it gets to the store may not always be
Mm-hmm.
controlled. But
Right.
if the store has kept it under refrigeration permanently, uh, there's a better chance of it being in better shape.
All right. All right. All right.
The date on which the beer was produced, how far
Mm-hmm.
ago was it? If it was within the last few months, okay. Certain
Mm-hmm.
kinds of beer do go through a process called bottle conditioning. Certain Belgian beers, so you'll see them with the Lycerium, with Chimay and these things. So if
Mm-hmm.
those have been stored properly, they will actually be all right, even if they are a bit old, so long as they've been stored properly. And of course,
Okay.
temperatures need to be moderate. Like for example, I mean, let's say if they've been gone through a Delhi summer, then maybe not. So always look at the
Okay.
date of manufacture, date of import, and ask if the store has been I mean, has kept the beer under refrigeration ever since it entered
Okay.
the
Okay.
premises. Those are the three things I would say to look out for. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So is it just you, or do you also have a team of professionals
Hmm.
working with
Sorry, you cut out again. Again, I lost the connection.
you? Okay. All right. Is it better now?
Now, yeah. Now it seems fine.
So do you have a team for your business, or is it just you?
So for what I do in terms of consulting, I don't have a team. It's just me,
Okay.
whether it's my events or training
Do
or
you
whatever. But
collaborate
for the
with other
business, um, well, in some cases, yes. For some events, I
professionals?
do. It could be
Okay.
collaborating. It varies specifically from event to event. Sometimes it's just me. Sometimes it's with in collaboration with someone else. So there's no hard and fast rule. But of course,
Okay.
the business I have, that where we want to take beers overseas. Though that's a whole separate thing where there's a partner like that.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, otherwise it's on a case by case basis.
Okay. Okay. There's a
Mhm.
audience question from Gauri. Are there any legalities involved in practicing this profession?
Well, I mean, you need to be of legal drinking age. That's about the only one I can think of.
Pretty much that's it.
Yeah, otherwise, yeah, that's about it. I mean, so if you make enough money, you'll have to register for GST. but uh,
Your
but yeah,
taxes.
nothing separate. Yeah, of course, nothing else separate from that. If it's a drinking age, that's about it.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. I think let's just wait for few seconds for Mahua to join. She's just texted me that she's having some major connectivity issues at her end. Meanwhile, we can take more audience questions. Otherwise, I am okay. All right. Why there's
Okay,
this question?
I lost the last 20 seconds of what you're saying, Surbi. Sorry.
Oh my God, the internet.
The
Okay.
connection is uh,
Yeah. So,
okay. Try. You want to try again?
yeah, we have an audience question from Environment Matters.
Yes.
Why
Okay.
does a refrigerated freshly brewed beer, if purchased,
Mm-hmm.
say a pint, for example, and kept in the
Mm-hmm.
refrigerator and not
Mm-hmm.
consumed within a day or two, why does it
Mm-hmm.
turn bitter?
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
This is yeah, this is something I haven't heard of. There are certain types of beer which are fairly bitter, so it may have been one of those.
Okay.
But typically, if your beer is purchased and put in the fridge, it would stay exactly as is because it's sort of been in the cold for, throughout. Maybe that
Right.
whatever 20 minutes getting from the store to your house. So I haven't actually heard of it turning bitter otherwise. But yeah, there are certain styles of beer that are bitter. Like for example, IPAs are fairly bitter. So
Mhm.
possibly that's the type of beer that was purchased. Maybe that's why it was bitter. Unknowingly, someone could have purchased a
Mhm.
bitter beer and not realize that it was going to be bitter. Because I mean, you can't tell a beer is going to be bitter by looking at it.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So that's I can't say I've actually heard of beers turning bitter after they've been bought. Um,
Okay. Okay.
I
So
mean,
it's
maybe
probably
maybe
mishandling from
the only
the
I can
side
think
of
of.
the.
Um, no, I don't even think mishandling will do that. Like I said, there may be certain. Maybe the most you might get is some astringency because of it's been warmed or something like that. Like it's gone cold, hot kind of thing. Bitterness doesn't really get added depending on when the beer's been. Even if the beer's mishandled, it won't become bitter. So that's
Okay.
something unusual. I haven't can't say I've come across that so far.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Hmm.
Right. I think Mahua is not able to join. All right.
Oh
So
dear.
we are having questions. What beer certifications can one start off in India? Which will be economical?
You can do the Cicerone level one exam. It's an online exam. I think it costs less than $100, if I'm not mistaken, and I think you get two attempts to clear it.
Okay.
That's the really the only one that's available right now. Um,
Okay.
the rest,
Is it valid
you,
is it valid and it is
it's
acknowledged?
valid it's valid worldwide,
Okay.
India included. There are a few people who hold it. I mean, maybe I don't know, maybe 100 people who hold it. Um, but like I said, these things are because of the nascent nature of the industry. These things are only just starting to catch on. I'm sure the more people who do it, we will have the facility to do more advanced, get more
Hmm.
advanced certifications. I mean, that's something I personally am waiting for as well. I would rather do it at a time when I can get a slightly more advanced certification, um, or I have the opportunity to go overseas and do it. Which, well, going overseas right now is out of the question.
Other question.
Um, yeah, so there's that. I know there is. So the boot camp sensory session I went for is run by one of the breweries in microbreweries in Pune. Of course, this year for obvious reasons it didn't happen, but otherwise every year they choose about 20 or 25 people
Okay.
um,
That's nice.
who have to apply for it, and then you get this 2 day crash course in sensory training, deep dive on
Mhm.
brewing and things. Right, it's quite intense because it
Okay.
starts at 9 o'clock in the morning, goes on to 6 o'clock in the evening for 2 full days, and you do a brew as well.
Oh,
Um, so there's that, and but that's yeah, that you'll have to watch and see next year because this year obviously it didn't happen
didn't happen.
because of the lockdown.
Right.
And typically they want people who have some basic knowledge and understanding of beer and not just a layman's comprehension of it. That's generally what they say. Because I mean there are technical terms and things like that which get confusing if you don't have that basic knowledge. Those are the ones that I can think of, but again, that's not a formal. There's no formal education, like I said. I mean, you can do online. I mean, for example, the Cicerone. You go to their website, their channel, their blog, and do a lot of reading, watch a lot of videos on tastings, this that. and to get your certification, but there's no taught course as such for it. I think maybe
Okay.
one of the beverage education companies might get into it when there's enough of a demand. I feel because right now it's still quite
You have
limited.
done a certification from Indie Brew. Indie Brew is then what you call this?
In it's yeah, it's not a formal certificate. Like I said,
Independent.
that's Independence
Okay.
Brewing Company. That is the place where I did my that sensory crash course, the boot camp, two
Okay.
day
Okay.
thing. It's not a formal certificate or anything like that. It's just the people behind Independence, Shailendra, Shaili as we call him. He's very passionate about this and wants people to know more about it because I mean, I guess
Hmm.
that's a whole industry where careers can be formed now. That's been developing.
Right.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Wonderful.
Hmm.
Wonderful. So I think we are ready to wrap up the discussion. Mahua isn't going to
Okay.
join us due to the network
Oh dear,
issues.
that's terrible.
Yeah, it's quite
Okay.
sad. But anywho, thank you so much for joining us, Akash. I had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time chatting with you.
Likewise, likewise.
I learned
And
quite a bit about beer. I'll be honest, I'm not I'm not a beer drinker. I am
okay.
I just drink anything that just tastes nice. So basically,
Uh-huh.
I'm
Well, there's plenty of beer that tastes nice. You just haven't found a beer that you like yet. That's one way of
probably
approaching it.
I haven't tried any craft beers. I've only tried
Mhm.
those, packaged brands. I've never really tried a
Right.
craft.
Right. Yeah, that's quite possible because I mean, I have a friend whose wife just could not stand beer, and then one day we gave her a sour beer, and she quite enjoyed it.
Oh wow,
I was like,
must be
so when I was
revelation.
oh, I don't like beer, and I'm like, you just haven't found a style that suits you yet. I mean, of course, if you don't like it, you don't like it, but yeah, that's a possibility because there's so many thousands of styles out there.
And when you told me that, I envisioned that, taking that first sip, and then there's a white light on me and some holy music going on in my background.
Music and angels on harps.
Yeah, exactly. Angels and hearts.
That's a good one. Anyway.
All right. Thank you. Thank you
Anyway,
so
thank you so much for having me. It was lovely talking to you.
time with you.
I
Thank you so much,
I
guys, for
hope
watching this.
yes, I hope
Yes.
everybody who watched also had a fun time. And I'm going to
Oh,
now
they
go and
did.
look at all the comments and see. I'm sure, like I said, my friends were heckling me. So yeah.
You can do a bash of your friends in the group.
yeah. Well, I already got one of them, but anyway.
Thank you so much.
Uh,
Have a very
Thanks
good
so
week.
much, Subi.
And
You have a great
I
weekend too.
hope we definitely come back and do this again sometime in future. Wish
Absolutely.
you all the best, and I really hope you soar, or should I say sour new heights? I actually said sour new heights.
Sour New Heights. Yes, yes, definitely.
All right.
Uh,
Thank you. Thanks,
all
guys.
right. Thanks so much, Subi. Bye
Great
bye.
time. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Likewise.
Thanks for staying with us.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. Bye bye. Thanks,
Bye
Akash.
bye.